everyone. Welcome to Calvary Conversations. I am Joshua Paxton, Director of the Burnham Center for Global Engagement at Calvary University and Assistant Professor of Intercultural Studies. Almost forgot my title there. I'm here with Pastor Adrion Roberson of Berean Bible Fellowship. He is also Faculty Chair of the Kansas Leadership Center in Wichita, Kansas. He is a 2012 graduate of Calvary University and CEO and co-founder of KC United Youth Sports Initiative, CEO of Destiny Consulting, BHC, a certified John Maxwell team member, and he is, without any other ado, married with 3 sons and 6 grandkids. You know, that's like the most important part of that long listed title there. So,
Absolutely.
And so we are having a conversation today centered around leadership, culture, ethnicity, just those kind of principles. And so, Adrion, as I try to watch my time here, what has been, just as you have been involved in so many things, what have been, some of the challenges, some of the primary lessons you've learned as a leader in the urban core in Kansas City?
Well, first, Josh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you, man. And to answer that question, that's a great question. You really made me think there. You said 2012 graduate. It's just been 9 years. And I got all this stuff spinning in my head about what has happened since graduation. I would say the toughest things about leadership, as I understand this definition, which means mobilizing people to do difficult work, is in the urban core. Unfortunately, because of a lot of the challenges that we face here, you find we use numbers like 20% of the people doing 80% of the work, which means you have a lot of people who are so engaged in community service. And I don't use the word activist because that has a tendency to take on its own connotation. So we use the word, absolutely. So we use the word community servant. That it's hard getting people to see they have the capacity to lead. And because we've been brainwashed, and I'll just use that language to believe that leadership means a position. We believe leadership is an activity. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be in a position and lead, but when we're talking about tough adaptive issues and challenges like what we're talking about, like poverty, crime, homelessness, stuff like that, you can't fix that with a check. You can't fix that with a class. It can be a process, but we're talking about thinking in a way where you can make progress on the challenge and then mobilizing the people in that to do the work, even when sometimes the toughest person to mobilize is yourself.
Amen.
So the Kansas Leadership Center has, like you said, I've been there 9 years. It has changed the way I look at leadership. And when I look at it biblically, Jesus was an adaptive leader. You know what I'm saying? He had his technical parts, but then it had a lot of adaptive things going on there because of the nature of the situations he was in. So in the urban core, because the gaps are so wide, the challenges are so broad, it gets tiresome. So we deal with four categories, 4 dimensions at KOC. So the first one is managing self. And if you don't manage yourself trying to do this work, burnout is easy. Physical, the depletion of physical health, emotional health, trauma, all those things can happen. And we talk about diagnosing the situation. If you don't do it through a biblical lens, for me, you can get caught up in all the side stuff. You get off the highway, you're going on a rabbit trail, and then you're on this rabbit trail, and you got folks calling every 5 minutes. Can you do this? Can you help with that? And that makes it tough. And then we talk about intervening skillfully, the capacity to intervene or to come up with multiple interventions, because here, I must call it, the spirit of apathy is so strong. It ain't never gonna change. It's always been like this. Makes it hard to, when you're one of 20%, to get people to think outside the box, like something else is possible. So
Yeah.
the capacity to intervene skillfully is hindered. And then the final component that we talk about is energizing others. And so how do you energize people who don't have the energy for themselves? But has it happened? Absolutely. Has Jesus literally done what we call supernatural work here? Absolutely. However, with that, there's a lot of understanding what discipleship means. We say there's two cuss words in the church, and that's and here they are. Now, don't for y'all bleep this out. There's two cuss words in the church: commitment and time.
Oh dear.
Especially right, especially when it comes to discipleship. And so when you're discipling people who may have various vices and addictions and just deep rooted stuff, it challenges you to really wonder, because we do this, right? I'm done with you. You're not making it fast enough. You're not moving fast enough. You're not getting this. What's the matter with you? And then Jesus turns around and says, well, Adrian, I didn't do that to you.
Yeah.
So,
How
what
many
does it
times
mean
do
to,
I forgive my brother? Up to 7?
oh, my God, right? And that's per day, right? Like, so, being able to be in a community where the trauma is great,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges are generational.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you, as a believer, rely on prayer. I'm a big proponent on prayer. I'm a big proponent now on fasting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big proponent now on getting my butt in the Bible and read. Can I say that? I'm sorry. Can I say that? Getting my behind in that book, and not just reading, but meditating on what I read. Not just, well, I read 3 chapters in Numbers today, so I fulfilled my quota and check a box. No, it's deeper than that, because the enemy is real, bro. It is not this battle between spiritual wickedness in high places and spirit of antichrist and all that. This stuff is real, and they don't teach you that a lot. They just say, go take the world, and we walk across the stage like, yay. And then you get, reality sets in. It's like, they
There's
didn't
a
tell me about
there's a lot
that.
of school of experiential learning that has to happen after you walk across the stage.
Let me think about systematic theology. No, you don't have
Yeah.
time. It's like,
How does that work in this situation? Yeah.
absolutely. So I hope that answers your question. But it's an honor to serve the Lord here,
Amen.
and it's an honor to serve Jesus in this capacity. So
Yeah.
that's the
So
best I
what?
got.
So for the folks who are just listening to this and they're not seeing us right now, you can't tell because you're listening, but my skin is kind of a pasty tan color, and my brother Adrian here has a nice chocolate complexion. Maybe we could say he's a milk chocolate and I'm a white chocolate. And and so,
But
a component of our conversation here is the reality of what has been going on in our culture at large, in terms of Adrian and I had a conversation before this. We both don't like this word. Maybe we can communicate why, but racial issues in our community. Um, are there specific challenges that you face in leadership, Adrian, um, that come from a racial background, racial lens?
it's a great question. Um, let me say, I'm glad that you put it the way you put it initially, because I tell people I'm not black. That's a label I refuse to take. You know, and we just have different melanin content. I watched Dr. Joy DeGruy's post-traumatic slave syndrome conversation that she had at Oxford University in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw the scientific evidence that she had a lack of it, and to see that the whole race thing is a ploy by man to continue to keep the divide going. I look at it strictly from an ethnic component because that's how I believe God looks at us, is through ethnicity. So let me say that I'm not mad at folks that use the word black, but when I put my watch on, that's black. This microphone I'm talking to, this is black. I can't call you white because if I put a piece of white paper next to your face, you look nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you framed it the way you did. And if we're going to talk about race, the R word, we have to talk about it because it is so interwoven into the fabric of our culture, to where what we're talking about now is foreign, even to most believers, right? Because they say the most segregated time on Sunday is between black and white churches. I'm like, well, wait a minute, why are we using that language
Yeah.
when the culture is using that language? So, as an African American man, have I dealt with that? Absolutely. I was, you know, before I got saved, and even after, yeah, before I got saved, I wouldn't drive down Metcalf because we had certain we had WY on our tags, and we would get pulled over regularly. And
Wait, you had WY on your
and,
tags?
which would tell JO Johnson County Police or SN Shawnee Mission Police that we were from Wyandotte County, and
Oh, okay.
so it's a county designation. So Johnson County back then, there wasn't a lot of us there unless, you got recruited to go and play sports or something. But there was a few successful people who moved away from the hood per se that wanted
Yeah.
something better. So they moved to Johnson County. And it was a time there. I refused to ride down Metcalf because we got pulled over all the time.
Uh,
When my wife and I worked at Hallmark Cards back in the 90s in Liberty, Missouri, which was very, very segregated. Um, I could tell you stories about us getting pulled over in Pleasant Valley, which is right there where the Ford plant is, between
mhm.
Kansas City and Liberty. And I was told to get out of my car in the middle of winter, put my hands on the trunk. They took my driver's license. I had on no coat, and it was like it was maybe 2, 3 weeks ago. I went to put my hands in my pocket. They came over the mic. They come over the speaker. Don't move your hands.
Mhm.
40 minutes later, they came out and said they had the wrong guy.
Oh,
Uh,
40
had
minutes of
convers
standing in negative degree temperature.
easy, easy. Had a conversation with. Had a chance to be in a conversation with the Star back in the '90s about racial inequities, and they put it on the front page of the Sunday paper along with some other folks, and had a conversation with the police chief of Johnson County, and we're going through diversity training and all of this, and it was a photo op, and I got up and walked out because that's what it was.
Yeah.
We didn't really want to talk about the conversation. So, is race an issue? Absolutely. Do we see it being played out with the various systems within our culture? Absolutely. And I cannot say that it's all one-sided, because as a race, as a group of people who look like me, we've got our own challenges that we need to consider. I understand the wording Black Lives Matter when you're talking about it from a systemic issue, even though I know those folks running it have nothing to do with the Bible. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation.
But if we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, then we have to talk about us killing us. We have to talk about, we have to have that conversation, like I told you, the same energy, vim, and vigor, and frustration that we see with the larger system. Why can't we have that same fire for our system. The case in point is we have an African-American DA who, in the last election, I mean, everybody, we got to keep him in office. I mean, the police department came after him. All kind of state folks came after him. It was some of the craziest stuff we've ever seen. But we all locked arms, and he got back in office. Well, that's great. But I think it's an oxymoron when he has files on his desk that he can't close because nobody will come and tell who shot who.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of I'm gonna use this word asinine to me when we're fighting to get him in office, but we won't do the things that we put him in office to do as a community. And we still say, Black Lives Matter. So it's when you talk about how hard this work is, it takes Jesus to keep you grounded so that you don't get caught up in the burner. And I'm in the burner. And I'm not gonna lie. When the thing happened with George Floyd, my wife, and I thank God for her, she saw something on my face, and she got me out of town for 3 days. Because I remember Rodney King as a kid. I remember watching that.
I do too. Yeah.
Right.
I vividly remember sitting in my high school, and when the verdict was announced and the riots happened, and
it wasn't that nice, man. And I remember, I started thinking about my own life with my boys in the car and my wife in the car. I remember all the stories that have played out up to now. And I've got two granddaughters that are Hispanic and African American. They're the most beautiful children on the planet. And I often use Martin Luther King's when we do these types of DEI trainings and stuff like that, I use his I Have a Dream speech, and that was like 64. And when you do the math, that's like 50 plus years ago.
Long time ago.
I felt, oh, why are we still talking about this? Well, we know the heart of man is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it?
So let's help. Yeah, let's help. We've been batting around this a little bit. Let's help frame this a little bit for our listeners. And this is this is about a 26 minute time frame here, and it's an issue that we can't solve in the time that we have. But as we talk about, you mentioned this, so we talk about race as basically as an illegitimate concept. Race is a cultural construct. It was created by evolutionary theorists specifically for the purpose of discrimination. This mentality of race, and the only thing that it measures is skin color. So like that's it. We even so our government uses this term the wrong way. You go to a professional place, and you go to the license bureau, and they ask you for your race and your ethnicity, but the categories that they give you are actually the opposite of what they should be on those two documents. So to frame it a little bit better for our listeners, then, ethnicity, is a much broader concept than race. It might include skin color, it might, but it's also going to include language, culture, history, geography, where people live, background, just a whole host of other things which identify a people as a people group. And so as an intercultural studies professor, this is one of the things that I try to get into my students' head as they're interacting with everybody, to look at, to understand people through this broader lens. So moving on from the racial lens, because we want to, how does the culture as a broader as a broader concept impact your leadership where you're working? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I'm with you on the ethnicity and the social construct. My thing is like, even with the current CRT conversations and the issues that like the Southern Baptists and folks are having, you got folks just being split over. I understand where they're coming from because the majority of them are coming from your perspective. However, because again, I'm gonna say it again, the race thing is so ingrained, you can't just push it to the side and act like it's not there, because you've got a generation that is
Yeah.
like, that's all I've ever known. And
Yeah.
coming into like theological seminaries and folks like that, I mean, places like that, systems like that, to get them, let alone people my age or older who've had to deal with what has happened with Jim Crow and all those things for being my melanin color. Race has to be a conversation, and taking it back biblically to say, however, for a believer, if we're going to if I can look at Josh and see him as anything other than my brother in the eyes of God, do I see color? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I see white? Nope. I don't see that. So does he see black? Nope. But what do you see, Josh? I see a brown, like you said,
Yeah.
Eminem, punt peanut head, African American brother. But
Yeah, I'm
it's
working on that. I'm working on
you're working on. We about there, yes, sir.
that.
Won't be no barbershop in heaven. We're gonna be all right.
Yeah.
But
People listening, we were just comparing bald heads. The podcast people can't see us.
but it's an interesting conversation to get believers to pause, and
Yeah.
especially in our context, where I just got off Facebook, and I'm tired of American Christianity, and this is from a pastor who was one of my African American mentors when I came out of Calvary. And I mean, he goes in hard on, quote unquote, white folks, Caucasian folks. And I'm like, I get it. I think I get it. Yet my question is, from a biblical perspective, how can I have this conversation with my brother who God beautifully made different than me, whose education, social, economic, family, your bandwidth is different than mine? How do, as a believer, should I be addressing these in a way that it doesn't cause more division, especially within the household of God? So we were doing reconciliation conversations after George Floyd. So we had a few churches from the north part of Kansas City come to our church, and we were talking, and there was a Caucasian brother there, and he sat there very intently, and we talked about the word ally. If you're going to be an ally, then we have to take you to a place that's uncomfortable. So what does that mean? Well, let's really go to the core of why people look at you a certain way. So we talked about, let's watch 12 Years a Slave. Let's watch 13th. Let us show you some data where you can get the root of the bitterness. So you can see what slavery actually did. And he stood up in the room. He said, "You know what? I know this meeting is necessary." He said, "I have a congregation of 1,500 people who majority look like me, and I can't have this conversation with them." Okay, pause.
Mm.
My KLC thinking popped in, like, okay, observation. Caucasian man, pastor, stands up and says, "I can have this conversation with my church, and a majority of them look like me." That's observation. My interpretation is, one, you're scared. My interpretation, you're afraid they might leave. Two, it's gonna hit you in your tithes and offerings pocket. Three, you might find out something about your congregation you really don't want to know. And so so the intervention I came back with was, okay, sir, why not? What? And he said, "I just can't do it. I just can't do it." And he walked out the room.
Oh
And
man.
there were 7 pastors in the room. And we all just looked at each other, and Pastor Clay was there. Uh,
Yeah.
that's my dude, right? That's my bro. So he comes to the meetings, and I love how he is just really expanding his thinking. And we just kind of looked at each other, and it was like, we know there are some people like this, right? because flip the coin. There's some people who look like me who we live in Wyandotte County, and it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But you don't see any Hispanics in our church. Now we do, but you don't
Yeah.
see him. You see what I'm saying? We can't
Yeah.
just you can't just point the finger at people who have a lighter melanin ethnicity and not look at the mirror and say, well, what are we doing if Wyandotte County is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? How are we reaching out to our Hispanic brothers who may be looking for a church? How are we
Yeah.
looking out our Caucasian brothers and sisters who may be looking for a church? So as a believer, you can't just you can't do that. You can't put, and I don't want to hear no more about white fragility. I don't want to hear that. Because I know some people who look like you, that's not their fault. It wasn't. Stop putting all of that on. Okay, if you want to do anything, ask them how they feel about it, and then say, okay, what can we do going forward? Now, if they're being silent because silence is consent, I believe that's a conversation we need to have. Okay, so how are you educating your people, brother? How can we talk in a way so that for someone who's never come to the hood can understand what it's like to be in the hood, and for those of us who live in the hood who've never been to the burbs can understand some of the challenges in the burbs, right? So that's what my mindset is, which is a lot different than a lot of people, but that's cool, because I'm 69, I don't care. But 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 it's and not but however, it's always great to have these kinds of conversations, because I wish that brother would have said, why can't you tell this, why can't we have this conversation at your church? Why
Yeah.
can't you call your congregation? We'll bring our congregation. We might even fellowship afterwards or before. And so I don't know. I'm not trying to be long-winded, but that's just
No,
where
you're
that is.
great. I mean, yeah, that's maybe we should we're running close to the end of our time here. But maybe the key point that we want to leave. This is Calvary Conversations. And really the whole purpose here is that we're having these kind of conversations, because if
Yeah.
we're not, you know, um something I like to tell my students, you have to take a seat at the table. If you just get up and you walk away, then you've done two things. One, you may have limited someone else's. So let me frame this in terms of theological differences in the church. Okay.
Right.
And so let's say you leave the table because you don't want this person that you disagree with theologically to influence you with what you believe is their errant theology. Okay. Well,
Right.
maybe you've removed their ability to influence you, but you know what you've also done? You've removed your ability to influence them, because you're now not participating in the conversation. And so we all just
Yeah.
got to take a seat at the table. uh
But see, that's where race comes in again, because of systemic situations. A lot of ethnicities who may not look like the power group can't get to the table, or aren't afforded a seat at the table.
mm,
So that's what I mean when we at least have to have the conversation, because those things play out. They just do. When you look at who runs most of the businesses who run our prison systems, that's why we tell people, watch the movie 13th. When you look at that, and it's like, wait a minute, Nestle's chocolate? Absolutely. When you look at the Microsofts and you look at the entities who run some of the systemic issues when it comes to systemic racism, um, look at who they are. And I'll close with this. I challenge people, because my definition of racism, or a racist, is someone who has the capacity to withhold from another group or another person.
mm.
A lot of people that you want to put that label on don't have that power. You know what I'm saying? Now they may have a certain privilege because of their melanin content, but they don't have that power. My question to believers is this: what's the root of racism? Could it be bigotry? But see, that doesn't sell. That
Well,
doesn't
it's
that
sin.
doesn't
Yeah,
make sense.
absolutely, it's sin.
It's sin, right? It's sin.
I mean, as
So
believers. we should be acknowledging, we should be acknowledging Genesis 1:26 and 27. Let us make man in our image. We all bear that image equally, and it has absolutely nothing to do with our physical appearance. And so as believers, we should be leading the charge on that. Amen, brother?
The world's going to be the world, but we're supposed to be in it, but not of it. So absolutely. Yes, sir.
So
I'm in agreement.
Be the church. So, all right. Adrian, thank you, brother. Thank you for being here and participating in this conversation with me. And we hope that we get to continue it, and maybe we can start being a source of change in the world around us.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
If anybody wanted any further information for you, anything that you could share, you have a podcast, right?
Yes, sir. We do a podcast on Monday nights. It's called Pop's Corner, every Monday from 7 to 8. And we just talk about, from a biblical perspective, issues that are pertaining to the church, urban core, etc. It's on Facebook and YouTube. And so I'm looking for another right now. We should be going through the next couple of weeks, but I had to change my platform because I didn't like the platform we were on. So give us a couple of weeks. I'll get that information to you. And just come on out and we talk from a biblical perspective. It gets a little warm, but that's okay. We agree to disagree. And we just take on the tough issues that people don't want to take. So, amen.
Humility, right? Humility is key to this whole conversation. So,
yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, Calvary Conversations is a ministry of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. You can find more information about Calvary at calvary.edu. or call us at 816-322-0110, and go on your favorite podcast provider and look up Pop's Corner, and you can hear more from my brother Adrian. So thanks for being with us today, everybody. Bye.
All right. Thank you.